Hi, this is Suhan, and you're listening to No Syllabus Essays. Advice without accountability. These days, anyone can sound like an expert when they've got nothing on the line. So, how do you separate the advice that's worth following from the noise? Today's essay, The Advice Economy, will explore how advice without consequences shape our decisions and why the burden now falls on us to tell the difference. Avoid taking advice from someone who gives advice for a living, unless there is a penalty for their advice. Nassim Nicholas Taleb from the book Skin in the Game. In 2025, the Knicks made the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in decades. And suddenly, the entire city became an expert on how the Knicks could win it all. None of it cost anything to say. That's the thing about advice. It's cheap when the consequences are offloaded. Costless advice for the giver, costly for the receiver. The easiest problems to solve are other people's, and most advice tend to be given by those who are farthest from consequence. The infestation. Getting bedbugs in New York City is practically a rite of passage. When I first moved to New York City, I heard so much about bedbugs that I became an expert before I had to experience them myself. That's the infestation behind the infestation. The unfortunate experience came later. So did the realization that knowing about something isn't the same as knowing what it costs to live through it. Advice given on the internet spreads like bedbugs, fast spreading and often devoid of accountability. It works because social media doesn't run on expertise. It runs on engagement. The advice comes from a platform, not a place of personal risk. In nature, when there are no predators, deer populations can grow unchecked, overwhelming their environment. In today's digital landscape, we are witnessing a similar proliferation of life coaches, experts, and advice givers, unregulated by experience, feedback, or cost. Pest control. Symmetry of information underpins trust. Asymmetry undermines it. Growing up, my mother kept a collection of receipts from Costco or anywhere we shopped. She would pour over the itemized list and then the price we paid on the way out of the store, and again at home a few days later. Even now, with everything digitized, she still asks for prints. Receipts reflect symmetrical information, a mutual understanding of value. My mom knows what she paid, and the store knows what they charged. That transparency keeps everyone honest. In a functioning market, this symmetry is key. No one pays to watch me dribble a basketball. They pay to watch LeBron because the value is backed by a trail of receipts. Read LeBron's highlights. Unfortunately, with the advice economy, that isn't the case, due to asymmetric information that distorts systems, even well-intentioned ones. The problem with good intentions. Contextless advice, even when well-meaning, can mislead, as was the case with President Bill Clinton's Hope Scholarships. It was a part of his education initiative aimed at reducing student loan debt. Students could take out loans for college and pay them back based on their future income. It was well-intentioned. The flaw wasn't moral, it was informational. The government, as a lender, lacked insight into what the borrower knew privately. The student knows more about their future than the government ever could. That's asymmetric information. A film major and a finance major at NYU don't have the same earning potential. But no federal loan system can see that. But the loan terms, the same. It assumed all degrees were created equal. They're not. This mismatch between surface level data and deeper context is the same issue we face in the modern advice economy. A flood of generic advice from people who don't know your situation and won't stick around to see what happens if you follow their lead. Policies and advice built on average often serve almost no one in particular. It's just statistical noise dressed up as insight. There's an old economist joke that highlights this. Two economists throw darts. One hits left, another hits right. They nod and say, on average, we hit the bullseye. Advice today often follows the same logic. It targets the middle, but people live in the specifics. Wild West. The advice economy we're in today is reminiscent of the Wild West. The Wild West refers to the American frontier period around the 1860s, when the western United States was being settled and developed. It was a magnet for speculation, improvisation, and improvisers. Law was light, and the reputations were portable. It attracted and rewarded those who could sell fast, move quickly, and say something with certainty, regardless of the truth. Today's digital landscape echoes that. The advice givers roam digital saloons of TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more. They offer near certainty for clicks. There is countless advice out there on the market, from secret stocks to deep analysis. The same goes for health, relationships, and more. All focused on taking advantage of the structurelessness of advice culture, the lack of regulation on tech, or the democratization of sharing expertise, decoupled from any consequences. It's easier to sell a solution than to live through the problem. None of this is to say all advice is bad, or that every so-called expert is a fraud. It is to highlight that the burden has shifted to the advice receiver. That's your problem. My retired neighbors in Florida worked at General Motors back when they had pensions. Pensions were professionally managed, risk was pooled, and the goal was clear. Someone else made the hard decisions for my neighbors and bore the consequences if they got them wrong. Then came the shift. Pensions gave way to 401ks. Today, we are the portfolio managers. Asset allocation, risk tolerance, and diversification are now our concerns in addition to living our lives. The structure didn't disappear, it simply moved from centralized and managed to individualized and self-directed. Advice has followed the same trajectory. In the past, there were gatekeepers, such as editors, mentors, and institutional filters. Advice was curated, considered, and contextual. Today, it's frictionless and abundant. The barrier to giving advice have disappeared. We're now in the 401k era of advice. Fully democratized, fully decentralized, fully your problem. Rooted in vigilance, we must ask ourselves, what incentive does the giver have? What do they stand to lose if they're wrong? All advice isn't worthless, but be skeptical of those who speak with certainty, as those aren't often the ones bearing the risk. Outcomes are rarely as simple as the stories we're told. For the joy of learning, Suhan.